I am Jimbo Paris, and you are listening to The Jimbo Paris Show. Welcome again, everyone. This is the edition or the next part where we will be discussing the ethical and fundamentals of social media. Now, understanding the ethics, the legalities of managing social media, of course, is crucial. Because if you don't know how to move in the social media landscape, how are you supposed to be a successful marketer? You'll get shut down instantly. So it's important to understand the code of conduct and the ethics. And we're doing this because, again, if you want to be a good marketer, the easiest route is by playing along towards the rules that social media has. So let's begin here. So the first thing we're going to discuss is, what is ethics? Ethics is essentially a set of guidelines and a set of rules that can sort of influence behaviors and interactions. And ethics can be anything. And having a code of conduct is just essential. Now, more specifically, so if you look at my notes here, having an ethical code of conduct basically allows us to look at various situations. And these also help to tell us many of the differences from what is right, what is wrong, etc. They also can translate into other areas as well. Organizations, advertising, public relations, journalism. Again, all of these things can carry over to this concept and idea of ethics. Now, as we continue on here, we go on to the next point. Recognizing the legal and ethical consequences and challenges that social media could raise. So, there are a lot of essential sins that can occur due to the misuse of social media. Now, I'm going to sort of jump into these sins here. So, the first sin is, first of all, misappropriation and manipulation. If you adorn a certain appearance, if you're a fraud, if you try to manipulate people to buy a certain product, do things such as scammers, that's a big no. That should be standard. Now, the more specific ones that might catch you off guard are the ideas of ignorance. Ignorance is not knowing enough about the audience, not understanding the audience, and not engaging with the audience. That also goes into another one called abandonment. Abandoning your audience without giving them some sort of explanation is bad ethics as well. Monotony was one thing that got me in trouble because it actually ended up getting one of my social media accounts banned. Again, it's a fortune that I learned that lesson once I landed my internship with G. So again, it's important to know that because I wasn't aware that sending out posts regularly was going to get you removed, and that's what happened. My account was used in a bad way, and it ended up going downhill. But what did I do? I learned the lesson, and I began to use my account the correct way, and my LinkedIn is doing excellent. So monotony was a big one I need to look at. There is a fine line between advertising and monotony. Again, advertising content in a regular way is fine, but not doing that is bad. If you're just spamming messages continuously, it just needs to be the same message in a not so appeasing way. So this is why it gets a bit gray area-ish, because this is when you start going into the idea of narcissism, if you will. Because narcissism is sort of the idea of not learning a lesson. For example, if I didn't learn that lesson and I was a narcissist, I would have continued to make that same mistake. Obviously, I slowly realized as well, Instagram wasn't the best bet for me because it was too expensive and the way I was using it in a monotonous way, it wasn't working. So I tempered the ego and I was like, let me just work with LinkedIn instead. And I ended up getting amazing results. But this whole idea of narcissism is also a big factor as well. Now, another issue is that employer presence is another big factor. Social media tends to support this notion of free speech. And I know we're going to get into this with the whole Elon Musk, Twitter, Mastodon debate. This is not what this is for. Let's keep it simple here. There was a woman named Haley Page. She was a wedding industry designer. And essentially, she would post her own images and her own content. But her employers didn't like that. And there was this whole big debacle about her employers preventing her own free speech. And this is why it's important to, well, I'll get into this later, but it's important to sort of, I'll give you some pointers on how to do that, but you're going to have to sit down till the end of the video. Now, another point I would like to give here is bullying and providing no credit. If you're taking content and providing no credit, that's one big factor. This is why a lot of times you see YouTubers, they have reaction channels. They take a YouTube episode, maybe something funny, they react to the funny video, but they don't give credit to the actual person who made the funny video to begin with. That is a big no-no. You don't do that. You have to give them credit, at least if you want to play the game right. But understand something. It's an art, not a science. Some people get away with it for a while, but eventually the platform itself will find out and you'll get removed. So play the game right. You won't have to worry about these things. Play the game wrong. You're doing that at your own risk. Again, not telling you not to do this stuff. I'm not telling you to do this stuff. I'm simply saying, don't do what I say at your own risk. Now, bullying is another factor, pretty self-explanatory. Don't go after people, especially your competitors, in an immature, bad manner. Okay? It's one thing being like Wendy's and joking about a post that McDonald's made, but it's another thing flaming and posting bad content to essentially malignantly vandalize a business in an inappropriate manner. There's different ways to play the game, and again, I'll say this. There is a good way to play the game, look at Wendy's, and then there's a bad way to play the game, and again, we don't need to go into it. Do it at your own risk. Now, the next thing we will get into here is the concept of ethical and legal principles for establishing a social media policy. So, copyright infringement. So, this is sort of a system set up by social media to protect authors, work, videographers, etc. If you're trying to make money with NFTs, I think this is an important thing to look into as well. Copyrights are a big factor with a lot of things. So, any photographers here, any videographers here, etc. You need to make sure that you understand these principles so you know how to protect your work. You're just like a scientist. The same way a scientist has patents to protect the things that he makes or the inventions that he makes, you also have your copyright infringement to protect your artwork, your products. And cancel culture is another big factor too. Cancel culture was a system that sort of evolved due to African American oppression, and it was essentially to empower more lower communities by giving them a voice. At this stage now, it's been weaponized to the point where I could go into a theorist called Bourdieu, Bailard, and essentially he focuses on the concept of hyperreality. And essentially this idea that cancel culture has become so powerful that it's created this fear. We're afraid of saying things because of how we'd be seen. And so essentially the internet has turned into this fake reality or a hyper reality where we have to word and phrase things in a way not to get canceled. But it's so subconscious at this point that a lot of people aren't aware of these factors. And then the next thing that we need to look at with cancel culture is you do have a freedom of speech, but there's also a notion of freedom of consequence as well. You can do whatever you want, but there's always going to be some form, some shape, something involving a general consequence. Now, as we continue on here, we're also going to be looking at the ethical and legal practices to work with social media, the best ones. In order to have a policy, you need to frame it. You need guidelines and you need to perform the correct guidelines. And essentially, it's important to have guidelines for everything. There's a certain way you need to navigate the social media platforms. Whenever you use a social media platform, make sure you sit down and you read all the guidelines. That was a mistake I made. I never read the guidelines. So a lot of times I would be in a Facebook group, right? I would have a podcast ad, a podcast post. I wouldn't read the guidelines for that actual Facebook page that was promoting my content. So I was breaking a ton of rules, and they weren't posting any of my ads for my podcast. This is why you need to read the guidelines for each page, or read them as much as possible and put together a general rule set. Okay? If a certain Facebook page says when you're posting a podcast advertisement not to put any words, don't put any words, just put the image. If they say no still images, you need to put in some words. You need to put in some more context. But you need to follow these rules. Now, I would say this, be efficient. I'm not saying read every single guideline for every single page, but try to find pages that follow a universal set of rules. And that's my advice. Focus on a universal set of rules. What are something all of these pages like about what you promote and what is not allowed to promote? Keep that in mind, and then you could quickly pick up, okay, this one likes this one likes this one likes this. Generally, these 3 pages, they all are okay with images and text. But I need to make sure that the images are all JPEG file and they don't look a certain way. Okay, I'm just throwing that out. But make sure you read the guidelines for things such as pages. And you need to have a code of conduct as well. An employee code of conduct is vital because employees will always have social media accounts. And you need to understand how they navigate the social media account. Respect their freedom, respect their right to post. But again, you also need to make sure that they are following a criteria that you put in place. Because again, they can't be doing certain things that are out of line. If you have content, business content, they can't be posting that business content as their own. They can't be working solo. They are supposed to be working as a team. Again, they're there to serve the team, not themselves. And that's how I see my business. We're all a team. And as a team, we need to have all of each other's back. And we work together. We take responsibility together. We learn together. We are a team. The next thing is sort of just being inclusive, bringing people together. I think all social media platforms should be inclusive to some regard, even if it's political. Again, you could have different views, but that doesn't mean that you have to be uninclusive. If someone has a differing opinion, respect them, but still have a boundary in place where you stand for something. Okay? And why am I saying? Because it's much easier if you stand for something and you accept other people than if you don't accept anyone. Okay? Taking responsibility is another big factor. If you're in charge of a large group of people, you need to understand your words have impact. Again, as a podcaster that's in college, that's taking care of his health, and also, running a marketing agency, and also this marketing teaching platform, I need to have a lot of balance. I need to make sure everything is connected and in place. I need to be a good example to others because I know the things I do will have impacts on other people. And it really is about taking that responsibility. I mean, think about it from your perspective. If you're an influencer and you have a fan, what if you reverse the roles? Would you be your best star? Would you be your best role model? But understand something. By being a role model, I'm not telling you to be inauthentic. Okay? You need to be authentic, but be your best authentic self. There's certain things I would never do, but those things that I would never do are things that are authentic to me. I will always be focused on empowering people, but I will never focus on trying to force people or trying to make people follow a certain agenda that I wouldn't want them to follow. I would never do anything that would hurt that image. I would always push this message of growing the community, strengthening people by bringing on successful minds and successful people with successful beliefs to motivate others. I would never bring on someone on the show that would maliciously affect them. And that's me being authentic. I don't care how reputable this person is. If they do not possess a good image, I can't bring them on, no matter what good of a role model would make me look. So I have ran through all the points here. So hopefully this was a very educational set of information. You understand now the legalities and ethics and sort of the fundamentals of managing and being on social media. All right. Thank you. I'm Jimbo Paris, and this is the Jimbo Paris Marketing Experience. Thank you for listening to the Jimbo Paris Show.